A 16-year-old who killed his entire family is going to be released in 2025. At the parole board hearing, he told them that he changed himself from the person who had killed his parents and his siblings. Yet many don't believe that at all. This convicted killer is only being released early due to the fact that a Minnesota law has recently been created. Many are fighting this law.
I cannot stop what is already in motion, and we as the public, must trust the parole board's decision and have to hope Mr. Brom is ready for this transition. It is still hard for me to accept and forget the sights and smells of what I saw that Thursday evening in 1988.
Many wonder if mental illness was the cause of these murders or what the motive possibly could be. There are a few theories, but none have ever been confirmed. And although this killer is being released, he still has not talked about why he did this. You are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I am Brooke Makenna. If you like this sort of content, then I would be so grateful if you would subscribe. And if you want to, you can sign up to the Genuine Gem newsletter so I can personally send you the videos that I upload and you never miss. But first, a quick mention for our longtime sponsor, Pair Eyewear. Pair Eyewear has versatile eyewear for wherever you want to go and however you want to dress with their customizable frames and interchangeable magnetic top frames. So whether I want to have this burnt orange or maybe I want to go with a black like my dress, it can be changed in seconds. They even have a sunglass option for this summer, which I have been loving. I can literally take them everywhere and be able to have sunglasses and then regular glasses. You can either get prescription lenses or blue light lenses in your glasses so that you can protect your eyes from the screen. And if you don't know which shape looks best on you, I get the Wanda. Pair does have a virtual try-on their website, and it's never been easier to find your perfect glasses. And when you get Pair, you are actually giving to children in need with their Pair for Pair program that once you purchase a pair, they send one to children who need glasses as well. Just click the link in my description for 15% off your first pair and use code Brooke Mckenna 15. Now let's get back to the story. So back in 1988, the Brom family lived in Rochester, Minnesota. This family included 41-year-old parents Bernard and Paulette Brom and their 4 children, who were 18-year-old Joe, 16-year-old David, 13-year-old Diane, and 11-year-old Richard. Bernard and Paulette had met when they were 25 years old, going to colleges nearby one another. They were both raised in Catholic families, and they quickly fell in love. They got married, and they moved 2 hours away to Rochester together. As they raised a family together, they were deeply involved in the Catholic Church and were leaders in a marriage counseling program. While Bernard had a job outside of the church at IBM, Paulette actually worked at the church as a director of the preschool. She adored her job, she adored kids, and her dream job would actually eventually come true. She would become a stay-at-home mother to her children. When Bernard was not at work, he was always playing with one of his many children. He was said to be very close to all of them. With David in particular, Bernard was working on fixing up an old car together so that he could drive it to school. All these kids were attending Catholic schools and were doing very well academically and socially. In 1984, they moved into a house in the rural area of Rochester called Cascade Township. But on February 18th of 1988, police would receive a call from the local high school asking for a welfare check on the Brom family. Administrators had claimed that a rumor was going around that there was something wrong with David's family and that he may have hurt his father that morning. David was the 16-year-old son of this family who was a sophomore at the Lourdes High School. It was the beginning of the day. He hadn't attended any classes, but he had been seen in the area of the school prior. But none of the children had actually made it to school that day, and it turned out that Bernard had also not made it to his job. The Olmsted County Sheriff deputies would arrive at the home around 6 p.m. in the afternoon and would find a horrific scene, a scene that would be seared into the minds of the officers forever. Sheriff Kevin Torgerson was one of the first to arrive, and he would notice a set of tire tracks up and down the driveway in the fresh snow. So walking up the driveway, he actually followed the footprints that he found into the garage. Now the garage light was on, and wet tracks showed a vehicle had been in and out out of the garage recently. The doors in the home were closed, but they weren't locked. The home was said to be in a normal amount of disheveled, a lived-in home with children. The only real mess that kind of piqued investigators' interest was in the bathroom. But inside the home, on the second floor, 2 bodies would immediately be found. All 4 had numerous gashes in the heads and the upper bodies. They were all in states of rigor mortis, indicating that they had been dead for longer than 12 hours. However, only 4 bodies were found and 6 people were in this family. These bodies were identified as parents Bernard and Paulette, as well as their 2 youngest kids, 13-year-old Diane and 11-year-old Richard. Diane was said to love sewing. She was in 8th grade. She loved basketball, cheerleading, piano. Richard, or he went by Ricky, loved football games, especially watching with his grandfather, as well as biking and computer games. Diane was described by her friends as having beautiful hair, freckles, and a shy smile. But 18-year-old Joe and 16-year-old David, the eldest 2, were nowhere to be found. As investigators searched the rest of the home, Sheriff Torgerson said that he started to go up the steps, and immediately upon getting to the upper landing, he saw 2 sets of bare feet. They were still as he approached, and he then realized that they were covered in dried blood. He then went to the master bedroom, where he found a man squatting on his knees next to the bed with his right arm up on the bed and his head kind of slumped over in front of him. It was obvious that this man was also dead. He noted that this was a very odd position as well. But when he entered another bedroom, he would find a young boy lying on his bed in a fetal position with serious wounds to his head, clutching a blanket. Now, of course, investigators would search the rest of the home, and they went into the basement, where at the bottom of the stairs they would find a 28-inch blood-soaked axe. The forensic evidence on the axe matched the 4 victims. Now, at this time, investigators were also testing that axe for palm prints and fingerprints due to this being the alleged murder weapon. It appeared as though these victims had been struck 56 times in total. Mother Paulette had been hit 5 times in the head. 13-year-old Diane was struck 8 times. Ricky was struck 9 times in the head and had a slash on his neck after death. And the father, Bernard, was struck 22 times in his face, the back of his head, his hands, his arms, and his back. Someone had come into this home and butchered this entire family. And despite the reason for the welfare check being that David was missing from school and they had possibly said he had something to do with this, investigators actually feared that he might be a victim of an abduction from this killer. It was so brutal that they didn't even think of a 16-year-old being the suspect.
I've got all the snapshots still in my head, and they're there, and the sensations, the smell, the different thoughts and the sounds that I was experiencing. I mean, they're right here. They have never gone away. But my wife and I, it would also happen to be our wedding anniversary that weekend. And we had planned a weekend at the Anderson house. And so this was Thursday night when the Brom incident occurred. And Friday, we had some friends coming down from the Twin Cities to take care of both our kids for the weekend. And we were going to leave that afternoon to go to Wabasha. And of course, things changed a little bit. And we didn't get out of town until later in the afternoon or later in the evening. It was well into the dark by the time we left. And that was really the best thing because, of course, my wife was very concerned. She knew something had happened. Of course, the news was just covering the situation. To go up there, to take that, it was a very quiet drive. We didn't say a whole lot or talk a whole lot. And then it was the next day. Both came down that next morning, and the dining area was really full with a lot of folks, but there was not a word being said. It was just quiet. And looked around as we sat down, and people were reading the paper. Almost every table had a newspaper. And I looked around, and I kind of got a sense of what was going on. And I looked at my wife, and I said, "Man, if they only knew."
Investigators had learned that the eldest child, 18-year-old Joe, had actually graduated from high school and had moved out of the home to live with a family friend. He had a steady job at a local restaurant, and so he was really not supposed to be living there or there at the time. Joe was said to be kind of the black sheep of the family, though, due to his rebellious phase after school. He was dyeing his hair crazy colors. He was listening to punk rock music, which was extremely odd and off-putting to the traditional Catholic parents, but It was a bit of an argument starter between them. They were said to have their disagreements about Joe's lifestyle, but he was an adult. However, his younger brother David really looked up to Joe and took it really hard when Joe moved out of the home. Joe had actually gotten David a part-time job as a dishwasher at the restaurant where he worked. But along with his brother's move, David was also found to have two very close friends who had moved around that time as well. David was said to be experiencing a lot of 16-year-old teen emotions. He was known to be very sensitive, and a combination of all of these things would cause him to actually take his own life. Now, this was about a year before the murders, and he survived, but this wasn't public to anyone, even in the community, even the family's closest friends, due to the fact that this was in the 1980s. This was not something that was spoken of. He had tried to commit twice a year prior. Again, he had been listening to punk rock bands like his brother Joe. He was kind of changing who he was, and it was said that his parents were not very fond of the way that he was acting. But because both sons were missing at this point, the investigation focused on them. Investigators were able to track down the eldest, Joe, as he was at his job at the Henry Wellington's restaurant. That evening, he was working as a cook, and they actually informed him of his entire family's murder. They were also searching for his brother, David. Joe didn't know where David was at this point. You see, investigators had gone from looking at David as a potential victim of abduction to a possible teen killer. One of David's friends was actually the one who went to school administrators that morning and told them about their fears of the Brom family and what had happened to them. So this friend would actually end up speaking to investigators, and they would inform the police that David himself had told her he killed his family. She stated David stopped her that morning and said that he was not going to school and was trying to convince her to skip as well. He then detailed what had happened that night prior, allegedly saying, "I hit my dad with an axe. I kept hitting him and my dad kept getting up." He told his friend he had gotten into an argument with his dad around 11:30 that night prior, and he stayed up until about 3 a.m. making his plans. He then went into the bedroom of his parents when they were sleeping at 3 in the morning and started with his father first. He then went to his mother and then his 11-year-old brother's room. And when he was finished there, he allegedly saw that his 13-year-old sister had woken up and had gone over and was looking in the hallway at her mother, who had survived and had climbed out of her bedroom and was trying to get out. That is when David said he attacked both of them, making sure that they were dead, and the axe was found to belong to his father. Now investigators weren't on the hunt for a missing boy, they were on the hunt for a killer. They believed that he had changed his appearance as well. Now remember the mess that they had found in the bathroom at this family home? Well, it turned out that mess was hair shavings and black hair dye, and after obtaining surveillance footage and witness statements, investigators were actually able to track David's movements throughout that day after he went and saw his friend right outside the school. He was driving the family van when he went to school that day at the Lord's High School. He then began to drive around town, stopping at Kutsky Park, Barlow Foods, Kmart, and Godfather's Pizza before he returned home. They were already deceased according to these statements. Around noon, David then left the house once again and went to the IBM credit union, withdrawing $250. From this, the footage of this, they knew that he was wearing neon pink tennis shoes. So they gave this information to the police. They gave out his photo saying he most likely has now dyed black hair, and many were reporting sightings that day. They were afraid because they believed that this was a teen who could have killed his entire family. A former teacher even spotted him at the Northgate shopping center, but when police arrived, he was already gone. So by 11 p.m. that evening, 5 hours since the bodies were found, the family van that David was known to be driving was located. This was at Methodist Hospital. However, David was not inside. As the search continued throughout the night and into the next morning, a call would be made to the police at 8:30 in the morning on February 19th. Now, a witness claimed that a boy looking like David Brom was outside at the payphone at the Valley High post office. Now, police were able to arrive before David even got off the phone. and they were able to sneak up while he was staring off into vending machines talking, and they were able to get all the witnesses away from him and arrest him. He didn't resist. He was found with a completely different look than usual, as they expected. He had shaved sides of his head and a black mohawk. Officers claimed that he seemed very resigned, but he was quiet and he was nervous, and he sat silently in the back of the cop car. A 16-year-old weighing 130 pounds who was believed to have butchered his entire family. At this point, he completely shut down and refused to speak. Family and friends and really the entire community couldn't believe it. Everyone described him as polite, dependable, cheerful. He was the type of boy who would babysit for neighbors, shovel neighbors' driveways, and refuse payment. He was quite a social kid with many friends. However, some of those friends would come forward to confess that he told them he was going to kill his parents. He had allegedly told one of them the night of the murders he was going to do it. Others said he was having trouble with his parents, and he was in trouble with his dad because of a tape that he had bought, and his dad didn't like him listening to that kind of music. However, other friends would state that it wasn't David who did this. He wasn't the type. As this was happening and spreading like wildfire in the news, a punk rock band called Negative Land released a statement that they had actually been placed under house arrest by the feds until the investigation into these murders ended. They implied that their chart-topping song, Christianity is Stupid, possibly caused this fateful argument in the home. When the news banged on their door asking for more information, it was revealed that the band had actually created a false press release due to having to cancel their tour because of financial issues, and they were trying to cover that up. Instead of claiming defeat, they created a lie based on the murder of an entire real family. As Dave was brought into the jail for his 15-minute arraignment at the courthouse, he appeared to be calm, and he was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 8 counts of second-degree murder. His palm and fingerprints were found to match those on the axe. He was ordered to undergo a psychiatric evaluation and be held under 24-hour watch in the county jail. 6 days later, he was moved to the Hennepin County Juvenile Detention Center for a week of testing by psychologist Dr. Carl Momquist. 15 days after that, on March 11th, he was moved to the Red Wing Juvenile Correctional Facility to be placed with people his own age. Now, it would need to be determined whether he was going to be tried as a juvenile or as an adult. And so on April 5th, Deputy Michael Braley testified in that hearing that he had never seen so much carnage in such a small area. Psychologist Dr. Malmquist, who had done the tests on him, testified about the court-ordered evaluation, and he believed that David suffered from progressive depression that built up over the years, and he had a sense of feeling oppressed at home. He also stated that David had tried to take his own life in June and September of the year prior to the murders. Now, by April 22nd, Judge Gerald Ring stated that under law, David must be tried as a juvenile. He didn't even agree with that, but he said he had to follow the law. Olmsted County Attorney Ray Schmitz said that he was going to appeal this. But David's friends started speaking out again that he wanted to get better, that they had talked to him while in jail, and he regrets the killings, felt like he had no other choice. Though it was not confirmed or ever recorded that David had actually said these things. On August 11th, a 3-judge panel from the Minnesota Court of Appeals were set to officially determine if David would be tried as a juvenile or an adult. And a month later, he was set to be tried as an adult. However, the defense obviously appealed this decision, and then the Supreme Court unanimously ruled that he would be tried as an adult due to the severity of the crime. Meaning they believed that this crime was so horrific that a 16-year-old needed to be punished to the full extent of the law, instead of a juvenile conviction, which could have had David freed by the time he was an adult at 19 in 2 years. But by January 25th of 1989, nearly a year after the murders, David Brom was transported from Texas, where he was getting treatment, back to Minnesota. He was arraigned on the murder charges with the bail set at $500,000. David pleaded not guilty by reason of mental illness. His trial would be in 2 phases, which was required by Minnesota law. Phase 1 would be to determine whether David was guilty of first or second degree murder, and Phase 2 to prove his legal mental illness at the time of the event and prove that was the cause. On September 27th of 1989, the trial officially began, and with the amount of evidence and testimony against David, his attorney, Terry Walters, tried to introduce the psychiatric testimony during Phase 1, but this was denied, this was not allowed, and the defense had nothing else to fight with, and so he rested. The jury was told not to consider David's mental illness in this phase, and so after just a week, with the jury deliberating for 4 hours, they found David Brom guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder. But was he not guilty by reason of insanity? Well, during Phase 2, the defense presented expert testimony from a psychiatrist who concluded that David did not understand the killing of his parents and his siblings was wrong when he did so, and therefore was legally insane. Now, all of this from psychiatrists was said to be based on the M'Naughton rule, a legal test used to determine criminal responsibility based on a defendant's mental state. This was a 140-year rule that a defendant cannot be held responsible for a crime if they did not know the nature of his act. The state had testimony from 4 psychiatrists, 2 of which concluded he was not legally insane, and 2 did not offer an opinion. They all agreed, though, he was suffering from some sort of mental illness or impairment. 7 out of 8 of the total mental health professionals that evaluated David found him mentally competent. Dr. James Stevens, a psychiatrist for the defense, then testified that David suffered from visual hallucinations for years and actually had alter egos who were 3 different personalities. He attributed the murders to the psychotic episodes, but he was the only one who thought so. And he even admitted that he never witnessed these personalities that David referred to as Justin Nichols' time, Jimmy Sanders, and David Brom. He just said that David had told him about them. The jury would then deliberate on Phase 2 for the next 21 hours. By October 3rd of 1989, David's 18th birthday, jurors found him sane at the time of the murders and found him guilty. Again, he sat silently even when asked if he had anything to say. He was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences for the death of his parents and his brother, and 1 concurrent life sentence for the death of his sister. It was unknown why the death of his sister was categorized that way, as though it was less than. But he was to serve a minimum of 52 years, which meant he would be eligible for release in 2041 at age 70. But as we'll discuss, that was not the case. Judge Ancy Morse stated that this was a case of extreme and monumental tragedy caused by a pathetically sick, depressed mind. But Brom's surviving family members had asked that he actually be given 4 concurrent terms, which would have meant that he would have been eligible for parole in 17 years. This was not granted, and Judge Morse actually had tears in her eyes while handing down the sentence, saying that she hoped that this case would trigger broader changes in Minnesota law regarding the use of the insanity defense. She and some others believed that the mental illness should have been taken into more consideration, but his case would automatically be appealed in 90 days.
This may, in a way, be a blessing in disguise. Had the jury acquitted David, it would have been great for David, but if the Supreme Court throws out M'Naughton, it might help many more people than just David who are mentally ill.
Brom, he's getting off light. You take a life, you deserve death. Why should he be any better than what his folks was?
He should have to pay the penalty, and I feel very good about that. But I feel much more sorry about his life, which led up prior to the murder. I wished he would have been able to receive help at that time.
We're all glad it's over. I mean, the sentiment that I've heard here, but for myself personally, I feel that the sentence that he got was justifiable. I'm glad that he's not going to be on the street in my grandchildren, my children's lifetime.
But the now 18-year-old David was sent to St. Cloud State Prison, a small step down from maximum security. And a year later in 1990, the Minnesota Supreme Court upheld the conviction, even though the defense claimed his rights were violated during the trial, and they requested the court grant him a new one. This was denied. After 29 years in prison, David Brom was then transferred to the Minnesota Correctional Facility at Stillwater. Many thought he still had 41 years inside. However, in 2023, only 5 years later, David's minimum term was reduced, which made him immediately eligible for parole under a new Minnesota law. This had been passed in 2023, creating an incentive release credit program, which was applied retroactively, meaning even the violent offenders who accepted plea deals under the expectation of serving life sentences could be released earlier. And just this year, 2025, David Braun went in front of the parole board. This was for a chance to be released 34 years earlier than expected. He told the board about his readiness to be released. He said that he had changed everything he could about himself that led him to that despair. He also spoke a little bit about a possible motive for the first time and the mindset that he had at the time of the murders.
How are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
I would like to start out, you've been through this before, start out by asking you to tell the board what it is you'd like to see happen as a result of today's meeting.
I'd like to walk away from today's meeting with an understanding of what a step-down process might look like for me.
Can you talk about your readiness, your journey, what led you to here and the
what led me to this point in my life?
Yeah, and your readiness, if you for parole as you've described.
Okay. Yeah, I've kind of spent my time the best that I can to change the things about my life that led me to the despair and the decisions that I made and the actions that I took, the crimes that I committed. I tried to change everything that I could about myself, and I believe that through the help of staff, programs, the support system I have in my life, I'm a good example of what a transformation can look like in a person's life through the Department of Corrections. I think that I've demonstrated consistency in that progress and in that maturing and growth, and I believe that I'm ready for parole.
The gravity of this offense is immense. Impact on your family, but the community, and as you say, the ripple effect. Can you help give a sense of understanding of, through the lens of today, what happened that could allow you to engage in the conduct and the taking the lives of your family members? As you look back now, how do you understand what you did at that time?
First, if I could just take a minute to talk about the effects of the crime on others. I would just like to apologize to the family and friends of Bernard, Paulette, Diane, and Richard. I caused tremendous loss in their lives, incredible grief and pain, and left them with confusion and unanswered questions. And I apologize for that loss, for that grief, for the murders that I committed and the effect that it had on their life. I'd also like to apologize to the courts, the court officials, the sheriffs, who just as a matter of the service that they provide to their community, that they were a witness to the crimes that I committed. And I apologize for the impact that had on their lives. And lastly, to the neighborhood, to the church we attended, the schools we were enrolled in, and the community of Rochester. I apologize for the ripple effects of losing an entire family in such a horrific way. And to give an idea of what leads a person to commit the murders that I did, I struggled with depression for some time, and it had clouded my thoughts, and it clouded my ability to process things. And I had grown to a short-sighted view that I thought these things were going to last forever. And I knew I couldn't live that way forever. And in the cloud of depression, I started to believe that other people were at fault for the way I felt. And unfortunately, that fault I placed on my parents and my family because I was often more depressed at home than I was in other areas of life.
When did you first start to get or gain a level of insight or clarity or an understanding of the depression? When did that begin to happen?
I started to understand a little bit about it when I was in the Oaks Treatment Center in Texas. That was a beneficial environment for me. They were supportive and encouraging, but I really didn't grasp the effect that it was having on my life until it started to kind of dissipate. That cloud started to dissipate in my life as I pursued my faith and as I pursued investments that other people were making in my life, probably closer to my early 20s. Yeah, I've had connection with several family members, all four of my grandparents, some aunts and uncles, and my older brother. I've also had some contact with a friend of my sister's. So I have had, not all of those have continued, but I have had some interactions with people who were affected by the crimes I committed.
What was that like for you?
It's always difficult to hear how painfully you've affected someone else's life. It was a difficult thing to hear, and to hear how it didn't end. The effects of the crimes didn't end after the funeral or after a short period of time, that they continue to feel the effects of loss and grief. It was also honestly sometimes difficult to hear their acceptance of me into their lives as I struggled to go through the journey of finding a way to forgive and accept myself. It was difficult sometimes to hear their forgiveness and acceptance of me.
What do you anticipate, or what would you expect if the board were to move you forward, or look at grant parole, whatever the board would choose to do? How do you feel like you would manage or be able to deal with that type of a transition? Well, certainly you're not the person you were when you were 16 years old.
So, I mean, with any challenge that I face, I believe I have a level of emotional maturity now in order to deal with and recognize what I'm feeling and to work through those emotions. And when that becomes a challenge to me, I have a very strong support system. And so I rely on the advice, counsel, and help of other people that are in my life. And they can usually speak to me in a way that's helpful. And going forward, I also know that I have resources in the community that are available to me that I can reach out to. Lastly, I also have, when there's challenges that I face, I'll know I have a parole officer that I can turn to for help. Ultimately, other corrections staff that I can turn to for help.
Now, David's family, his aunt and his grandparents, visited him all the time at the jail and advocated for him. He still didn't talk to them about the murders either, though. He was said to be a model prisoner who had never been in trouble while serving his time. But he would receive parole, and he is scheduled to be released on July 29th, 2025. At 53 years old, he will be headed to the Twin Cities halfway house while working a work release program. He will be under supervision and wearing an ankle monitor. The Minnesota House of Representatives Rep. Matt Bliss made a statement following this news, stating the 2023 law allows even the most violent offenders to qualify for early release. I authored HF 533, a bill to correct this dangerous policy by expanding the list of crimes excluded from earning release eligibility. The bill would bar offenders convicted of first and second degree murder, first degree assault, violent sexual assault, and other crimes from earning early release credits, ensuring that the most violent criminals serve their full sentence. Unfortunately, the bill was blocked in committee. Now the consequences have been fully realized as the state is set to release an axe murderer from prison. The people of Minnesota deserve a justice system that prioritizes victims and public safety, not early release for violent offenders. Though Representative Sandra Feist, the one who actually wrote the bill, stated that David Brom's release was in line with the Supreme Court. She said no one should have to spend their life behind bars for something that they were convicted of as a child when they've spent decades being rehabilitated. Many questioned, though, was a rehabilitation possible, and did it occur? Now, Olmsted County Sheriff Kevin Torgerson, who was one of the first responders on the scene, he released a message to the public after hearing about the release.
Recently, it has come to light that David Brom, convicted for the murder of his family on February 18th, 1988, is about to be released. For the last 37 years, I have had reminders of the evening when I was sent to a secluded residential area north of the city of Rochester to check the welfare of Bernard Brom due to concerns from the school that his son attended, as they had heard rumors during the school day that David may have harmed his father. When Mr. Brom was convicted, Judge Yancey Morse sentenced him to 3 consecutive life terms, which means he served 17 and a half years for each term. The difficult thing for many in the community, as well as those of us that worked the case, was that Judge Morse made his 14-year-old sister Diane's file a concurrent sentence to little 10-year-old brother Ricky's. There were a lot of questions at the time why the judge had done that. Questions never answered were surrounded by the idea that Diane's life was somehow worth less than her younger brother's. Some argued that it was because Mr. Brom was 16 at the time, and the judge gave him some leniency due to him being a juvenile. Our legislature changed the law to where juvenile offenders of serious crimes in our state now do not have to serve their entire sentences before they can be eligible for parole, and made it effective immediately, including those previously currently incarcerated by our state, thus making Mr. Brom eligible. As Mr. Brom, as we are now told, has faced a parole board, they have determined he is now eligible to move from a medium security prison and step down to a halfway house and eventually finish the remainder of his sentence on parole in public. So with that, Mr. Brom is benefiting from leniency twice for mutilating 4 people, his family members, including his 2 younger siblings. Diane and little Ricky could be parents and very productive members of our society today, but were never given the chance due to Mr. Brom's selfish, immature 16-year-old actions. To Mr. Brom's credit, in my understanding, he has done remarkably well in the various prison settings and has reached an understanding of the seriousness of his crimes. Mr. Brom has apologized to everyone involved and is remorseful for his actions. I cannot stop what is already in motion, and we, as the public, must trust the parole board's decision and have to hope Mr. Brom is ready for this transition in his life. I'm very pleased to hear that, but it is still hard for me to accept and forget the sights and smells of what I saw that Thursday evening in 1988.
Victim Diane, the 13-year-old's best friend, was a girl named Patty Price, and she would speak out to the news as well. Patty said that she remembered the day Diane didn't show up for school. She just thought her friend was sick. After school, though, her mother had come into her room. She then told Patty, "I don't know how to tell you this, but Diane is dead." Patty says that she remembers cleaning out Diane's desk at school, and she was sure that David walked in on the murders that day and fled from the killers. When he was arrested, she thought someone was holding a gun to his head to get him to confess. She admitted that David was like a brother to her. He was even nicer than her own brothers. She stated that growing up after that, she suffered mental health issues, and she even went to treatment for anorexia. And they wouldn't let her talk about the murders. She said even when she brought up that her best friend was murdered and that could have caused all of this, they didn't want to talk about it. So Patty herself became a psychologist to change that.
I had only just been to their house for a sleepover the weekend before.
Price.
I remember we had to sit with our class, and there were 4 caskets brought in, of course all closed. All that I could think of what was on the inside of those caskets. You know, what did the bodies look like? And it was just trauma after trauma. You know, and no help to be found. And I remember really people telling us not to talk about it. From age 13, when the murders happened, till age 32, was massively shaped by the murders.
But Patty has said that she's spoken to David through letters and that he has come to terms with the fact that he was going to be in prison for the rest of his life. He said he was missing his family. He regrets snapping the way he did. She spoke of a possible motive, though, that had yet to be released thus far. She stated that theories have been spoken of that David was actually struggling with his mental health due to what was happening to him with priests at the church he went to.
I grew up with the Brom family. My parents were super good friends with the Brom parents, and my dad works with their dad. And I was best friends from probably age 2 with Diane. Thursday of that week, she did not show up for school. And there was some concern that, you know, the parents didn't call in. Rick, her 5th grade brother, was not at school either. And that was just kind of unusual for kids to be missing without their parents calling in. Mrs. Brom was a stay-at-home mom. A phone call came in, and it was after 8. And back then in 88, that was not normal to get to have the phone ring after 8 o'clock at night. And my mom got on the phone and my mom never cried and she just started wailing. It was really unusual. And I remember just my body stiffening because that was so unusual. And she hung up the phone and she just couldn't get words out at first. And she said, Patty, you're going to die. I don't know how to tell you this, but Diane's dead. That was a hard time. That was a hard part of it, was how sensationalized it was and how people made out David to be a monster when I knew he wasn't. I mean, there is a little fear of what drives a kid to do that, and like, what help has he gotten since then? He's been in prison. I don't know if he's ever gotten the help he needs. If his, whatever caused him to do that has gotten worse or improved. I do know that he seems like a good guy. He seems like if I went to visit him, he would be a good guy.
Right.
And I do think that I eventually will. It's just because I don't think my life will be complete until I see him.
She said David has never been willing to talk about that, and nothing more has really been found on this theory. Other than that, many believe it was due to David's parents being strict and him believing that they were overbearing and didn't want them to parent him anymore. His next board appearance is scheduled for January 2026, but by then he will be walking among us. Should this killer teen, now grown man have been released? At the time of this upload, he will be among the public in 2 days. Is rehabilitation for someone who could butcher his entire family possible? Due to the reoccurring crimes of many released from prison, it's hard to have faith in that. Do you believe David was mentally ill at the time to that point that he did not realize what he was doing? Does he really have remorse today? But he wouldn't have even stood the chance to be released for almost another 20 years if it wasn't for the change in the 2023 Minnesota law. Should violent criminals be included in this? What about violent criminals who were minors at the time? Do you think that they can be rehabilitated? The most disturbing part to me is that we still don't know the motive of a killer who is going free. If we had a clear picture of why this happened and how a 16-year-old could get to the point of butchering his family, maybe we could understand if his remorse is real. But we may never know what made him kill, if that means that he could do it again and what the signs would be there for him to do it. The fact that he is not very open with that is concerning, but he has talked about his depression. Do you think that that was enough in the 16-year-old hormonal teenage boy's mind, brutally end their lives and then go brag about it to a friend? I tend to think that there is a little more than just depression that is happening here, whether that's more mental illness, whether that's something that David was going through and nobody really knew about it. That could be why he had such an anger towards his parents, who were very religious and were pushing their kids to do the same. If he was struggling with what was happening to him in that church, we don't really know. But we do know that he is going to be in the world once again. And I hope that he really is remorseful and he takes this chance at a second life and he lives it doing good and completely proves all of us wrong who were afraid. I hope that he is rehabilitated to the greatest extent and that this is nothing we need to worry about. But let me know. Maybe you don't have any fears. Maybe you think that this was the right choice and you were happy that it happened due to the fact that he was a juvenile when he was locked up. Some say that they don't ever believe that a juvenile should have no possibility of parole. What's your thoughts and opinions on that? Thank you so much for listening. This case is one that when I found out he was being released, I had to dive into that story that happened so many years ago, because it is just absolutely wild to know that he could have just, gone to school that day, told a few friends what he had done, had a day out with himself, getting food, possibly getting items that he was shopping for, getting hair dye, changing his whole look at the house where all of the bodies were, and then just heading out again. He was 16. But does that make it any better when he can kill a family, his own family, like a grown man? But thank you so much for listening. I really hope that you subscribe and you come back and you hang out with me again. I started a new series, Breaking with Brooke, if you didn't know. I will have that playlist linked down below. I just cover really recent cases and put a few in a video. Basically cases I wouldn't be able to cover because they're not long enough. There's not enough information yet, but I can put a few of them together for you guys, and so I will link those down below. I've made 3 Breaking with Brooke episodes thus far, so I will link those down below, and if you want to binge my videos, there's a playlist for that as well. But don't forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay, bye.